The rhythmic ping of the sonar echoed through the cramped operations room like a mechanical heartbeat, each pulse sending ripples of green light across Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun's weathered console. The ancient NSQ-26 system hummed with the persistent vibration of decades-old machinery, its brass fittings tarnished and its display screens flickering with the ghostly afterglow of phosphorescent tubes. Around her, the modern workstations gleamed with touchscreens and digital displays, their operators working in the blue-white glow of advanced technology, while she remained tethered to equipment that predated most of her colleagues by 20 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The USS Constellation sonar room buzzed with the controlled chaos of a fleet exercise, voices calling out bearing readings and contact classifications in the clipped, professional tones of naval personnel. But beneath the operational chatter, Sarah could hear the whispers, the barely concealed snickers that followed her whenever she entered a room. The woman who refused to upgrade, they called her. The relic keeper. The stubborn traditionalist who clung to obsolete equipment like a security blanket. She adjusted the gain on her console, her practiced fingers moving across controls that had been worn smooth by countless hands over the decades. The sonar pulse painted the underwater landscape in her mind with crystalline clarity, each return telling a story that only she seemed capable of reading. While her colleagues relied on computer algorithms and automated threat assessment systems, Sarah listened to the ocean itself, hearing the subtle variations in acoustic signatures that spoke of hull compositions, propeller cavitation patterns, and the distinctive sound fingerprints that marked different classes of submarines. The morning briefing had been particularly brutal. Admiral Harrison Wade, the exercise commander, had stood before the assembled officers in the pristine conference room of the command ship, his uniform crisp with the authority of 30 years of service. His eyes had lingered on Sarah with barely concealed disdain as he outlined the day's objectives, the fleet's defensive posture against simulated enemy submarine threats. "Of course, we'll be relying on our most advanced sonar systems," he had said, gesturing toward the holographic display. That showed the fleet's disposition. Modern warfare demands modern solutions. We can't afford to have our defensive capabilities compromised by outdated equipment or nostalgic attachments to inferior technology. The words had struck Sarah like physical blows, each syllable weighted with the dismissive tone she had grown accustomed to over the past 18 months since her transfer to the Constellation. She had requested the assignment specifically to work with the NSQ-26 system, one of the last operational units of its kind, but her superiors had interpreted her enthusiasm as an inability to adapt to contemporary naval technology. Sarah's journey to this moment of professional isolation had begun 3 years earlier in the classified depths of the Naval Research Laboratory in Monterey, California. As a young lieutenant, she had been assigned to a project analyzing acoustic signatures captured during Cold War surveillance operations, digitizing decades of sonar recordings that had been gathering dust in secure archives. What had started as routine data conversion work had evolved into something far more significant when she began to notice patterns that modern computer systems had missed. The laboratory's sterile environment, with its humming servers and climate-controlled storage units, had become her second home. She would spend hours listening to recordings from the 1960s and 1970s, when submarine detection had been more art than science, when sonar operators relied on their trained ears rather than algorithmic analysis. The old-timers who had operated those systems possessed an almost supernatural ability to distinguish between different submarine classes based on the subtlest acoustic variations, skills that had been gradually devalued as technology advanced. Dr. Margaret Holloway, the project director, had been the first to recognize Sarah's unusual aptitude. A former Navy sonar technician herself, Dr. Holloway had spent her civilian career trying to bridge the gap between human intuition and machine precision. She had watched Sarah work with growing amazement as the young officer demonstrated an ability to identify submarine signatures that escaped even the most sophisticated computer analysis. "You have something that can't be taught," Dr. Holloway had told her during one of their late-night sessions in the laboratory. The old systems required operators to develop an intimate relationship with the equipment, to understand its quirks and limitations so thoroughly that they could extract information that shouldn't theoretically be possible to obtain. Sarah had thrown herself into studying the older systems with the passion of an archaeologist uncovering lost civilizations. She learned to read the subtle variations in sonar displays that indicated different hull materials, to recognize the acoustic shadows cast by submarine appendages, to detect the minute Doppler shifts that revealed changes in depth and speed. Most importantly, she learned to listen to the ocean itself, to understand how sound traveled through water under different conditions, and how those variations could be exploited to detect targets that might otherwise remain hidden. The AN/SQS-26 system had become her specialty, a piece of equipment that most naval officers considered a museum piece, but which Sarah recognized as a remarkably sophisticated instrument in the right hands. Unlike modern systems that relied heavily on computer processing, the SQS-26 provided raw acoustic data that skilled operators could interpret with extraordinary precision. The system's analog components introduced subtle variations and harmonics that, rather than being limitations, actually enhanced its ability to detect certain types of submarine signatures. Her research had produced results that had surprised even Dr. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Holloway, Sarah had demonstrated that experienced operators, using the SQS-26, could detect and classify submarines under conditions that defeated more modern systems. The older equipment's broader frequency response and analog processing created a more nuanced acoustic picture, one that revealed details that digital systems often filtered out as noise. The breakthrough had come during a comparison test using archived sonar data from a NATO exercise in the North Atlantic. Modern computer systems had failed to detect a diesel-electric submarine that had been operating in the area. Its quiet signature, masked by thermal layers and background noise. Sarah, working with a reconstructed SQS-26 display, had not only detected the submarine, but had accurately predicted its course and depth changes, based on subtle acoustic cues that the digital systems had dismissed as irrelevant. Her findings had been documented in classified reports that had circulated through the highest levels of naval intelligence. The implications were significant. If newer wasn't always better, if human expertise combined with older technology could provide capabilities that modern systems lacked, then the Navy's rush to digitize everything might have created dangerous blind spots in their defensive capabilities. But recognition in research circles was different from acceptance in the operational fleet. When Sarah had requested assignment to one of the few ships still equipped with an SQS-26 system, the response had been skeptical at best. Her superiors had viewed her request as career suicide, a step backward that would isolate her from the mainstream of naval advancement. The assignment to the Constellation had been approved more as a way to accommodate an eccentric officer than as recognition of her unique skills. The ship itself was a study in contrasts, a modern destroyer that had been retrofitted with the older sonar system as part of a limited experimental program. While the rest of the sonar suite gleamed with contemporary technology, Sarah's console occupied a corner of the operations room like a shrine to an earlier era. The other sonar operators, all trained on digital systems, regarded her equipment with a mixture of curiosity and condescension. Lieutenant Commander James Morrison, the ship's sonar officer, had made his position clear from the first day. A rising star in the Navy's sonar community, Morrison had built his reputation on mastering the latest technology and had little patience for what he considered Sarah's antiquated approach. He was tall and confident, with the bearing of an officer who had never doubted his place in the naval hierarchy, and he made no effort to hide his belief that Sarah's presence on his team was a distraction from more important work. "I don't understand why they're wasting resources on that old system," he had told his deputy during Sarah's first week aboard, his voice carrying clearly across the small operations room. "We've got the most advanced sonar suite in the fleet, and they want us to babysit some lieutenant commander who thinks she can do better with equipment from the Stone Age." The comment had stung, but Sarah had learned to absorb such criticisms without response. She had faced similar skepticism throughout her career, from instructors who questioned her unconventional methods to colleagues who viewed her expertise as irrelevant to modern naval warfare. The key was to let her work speak for itself, to demonstrate through results rather than arguments that her approach had value. But results had been elusive during her first months aboard the Constellation. The ship's routine patrols in the relatively quiet waters of the Eastern Pacific had provided few opportunities for Sarah to demonstrate her system's capabilities. The exercises she participated in were carefully scripted affairs where the locations and characteristics of simulated threats were known in advance, reducing sonar work to a matter of following established procedures rather than exercising genuine detection skills. Her colleagues had interpreted this lack of dramatic discoveries as confirmation of their skepticism. During post-exercise debriefings, Morrison would present the results from the modern sonar systems with obvious pride, highlighting their precision and efficiency, while barely acknowledging Sarah's contributions. The message was clear: her old-fashioned methods were curiosities at best, obstacles to efficiency at worst. The isolation had been compounded by the ship's social dynamics. Naval vessels were small communities where professional relationships inevitably became personal ones, and Sarah found herself increasingly excluded from the informal gatherings that built camaraderie among the crew. Her colleagues would discuss their work with the enthusiasm of people engaged in cutting-edge technology, while Sarah's system was treated as a historical oddity that generated more amusement than respect. The junior officers were particularly dismissive, viewing her as an example of how not to manage a naval career. They would gather around the modern consoles during quiet watches, sharing stories about the latest technological advances and speculating about future developments, while Sarah sat alone at her console, listening to the ocean's ancient songs through equipment that their predecessors had once considered miraculous. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, the senior enlisted sonar technician, had been one of the few crew members to show genuine interest in Sarah's work. A veteran of 23 years of service, Rodriguez had operated multiple generations of sonar equipment and understood the value of institutional knowledge. He would stop by Sarah's console during the night watches, sharing stories about the old-timers he had served with, and asking technical questions about the SQ-26's capabilities. "The young officers think newer is always better," he had told Sarah during one of their conversations, his voice lowered to avoid being overheard by the watch officer. "But I've seen plenty of situations where the old systems worked when the new ones failed. There's something to be said for simplicity and reliability." Rodriguez's support had been a lifeline during those early months, a reminder that not everyone viewed her work as irrelevant. He had helped her maintain the SQS-26 system, locating spare parts and technical manuals that had been scattered across various supply depots, and had even arranged for her to speak with retired sonar operators who had served during the system's heyday. These conversations with veterans had been revelatory, providing Sarah with insights that no technical manual could offer. The old-timers spoke of the SQS-26 with the affection of craftsmen describing their favorite tools, sharing techniques and shortcuts that had been passed down through generations of operators. They told stories of impossible detections, of submarines caught in conditions that should have made them invisible, of the subtle intuition that came from years of listening to the ocean's conversations. One of these veterans, Master Chief Petty Officer retired William Thompson, had been particularly influential. Thompson had operated SQS-26 systems during the height of the Cold War, when submarine detection had been a matter of national survival rather than academic exercise. He had visited the Constellation during a port call in San Diego, touring the ship at Rodriguez's invitation and spending hours with Sarah discussing the intricacies of acoustic analysis. "The machine doesn't do the listening," Thompson had told her, his weathered hands moving across the familiar controls with the muscle memory of decades. "You do the listening. The machine just helps you hear what's already there. The problem with these new systems is that they try to do the thinking for you, and when they guess wrong, the operator never knows it." Thompson's words had crystallized, something that Sarah had been feeling but couldn't articulate. The modern systems were incredibly sophisticated, but their sophistication came at a cost. They created a barrier between the operator and the raw acoustic environment. By processing and filtering the sonar returns, they eliminated the subtle variations and anomalies that experienced operators could interpret as valuable intelligence. The SQS-26, by contrast, presented the operator with a relatively unfiltered view of the acoustic environment. It required more skill to interpret, but it also provided access to information that more automated systems might discard as noise. In the right hands, it could reveal details about submarine operations that even the most advanced computer analysis might miss. Sarah had spent countless hours refining her technique, learning to distinguish between the acoustic signatures of different submarine classes and to recognize the subtle environmental factors that affected sound propagation. She had developed her own classification system, based not on the rigid categories used by computer systems, but on the organic patterns that emerged from careful listening and analysis. The process had been lonely and often frustrating, conducted in the isolation of night watches while her colleagues slept or during off-duty hours when the operations room was nearly empty. She had filled dozens of notebooks with observations and sketches, creating a personal database of acoustic signatures that supplemented the official recognition manuals. Her work had been meticulous and thorough, but it had also been largely invisible to her superiors, who measured performance by the metrics generated by automated systems rather than by the depth of human understanding. The breakthrough she had been hoping for had finally come during a routine transit through the waters off the California coast. The ship had been participating in a minor exercise involving a few vessels from the San Diego Naval Base, a low-key training evolution that was expected to provide little more than practice in basic procedures. Sarah had been manning her console during the mid-watch, listening to the familiar sounds of the ocean while her colleagues dozed at their stations. The contact had been subtle, almost lost in the background noise of merchant traffic and marine life. A faint acoustic signature that appeared intermittently on her display, too weak and irregular to trigger the automated detection systems, but distinctive enough to catch Sarah's trained ear. She had spent 20 minutes carefully analyzing the signal, adjusting her equipment settings and correlating the returns with oceanographic data, before reaching a conclusion that had sent shockwaves through the exercise command structure. The contact was a foreign submarine, almost certainly a diesel-electric boat operating in a surveillance mode that had been designed to avoid detection by standard sonar systems. Its signature was unlike anything in the official databases, suggesting either a new class of submarine or significant modifications to an existing design. Most importantly, it was operating in waters that were supposed to be clear of foreign naval activity, conducting what appeared to be intelligence-gathering operations against the U.S. fleet. Sarah had reported her findings through the proper channels, providing detailed analysis and recommendations for further investigation. The response had been swift and decisive. Additional assets had been deployed to the area, and within 6 hours, the submarine had been positively identified and tracked until it departed U.S. territorial waters. The incident had been classified immediately, but word had spread quickly through the naval intelligence community about the detection that had been made, possible by obsolete equipment and exceptional operator skill. The official recognition had been gratifying but had also created new challenges. Sarah's success had validated her approach, but it had also intensified the scrutiny of her work and the expectations for future performance. Her superiors had begun to view her as a valuable but unpredictable asset, someone whose unconventional methods might produce exceptional results, but who couldn't be easily integrated into standard operational procedures. The assignment to the current fleet exercise had been both an opportunity and a test. The scenario was complex and realistic, involving multiple layers of submarine threats in an environment that closely simulated actual combat conditions. Sarah's performance would be evaluated not just by her immediate superiors, but by the fleet commander and his staff, who would determine whether her unique capabilities justified the resources required to support them. Admiral Wade's comments during the morning briefing had made clear that the stakes were high. The Admiral was known throughout the fleet as a modernizer, someone who had built his career on implementing new technologies and eliminating what he considered outdated practices. His presence as exercise commander suggested that Sarah's work was being evaluated at the highest levels, and that the results would determine not just her own future, but the fate of the entire program that had brought her to the Constellation. The exercise had begun at dawn, with the fleet deploying in a defensive formation designed to protect a simulated convoy from submarine attack. Sarah had taken her position at the SQS-26 console, checking the system's calibration and reviewing the oceanographic data that would affect acoustic propagation throughout the operating area. The water conditions were complex, with multiple thermal layers and varying salinity levels that would create acoustic shadows and distortions that could hide submarine signatures. Her colleagues had begun their watch with the confident efficiency of operators working with familiar equipment. The modern sonar systems had quickly established a comprehensive acoustic picture of the operating area, identifying and tracking the exercise submarines that had been positioned to provide realistic threats. The computerized displays showed clean, precise contact symbols moving across digital charts, each tagged with classification data and threat assessments. Sarah's display told a different story, one painted in the green phosphorescence of analog displays and the subtle variations of acoustic returns. She could see the same contacts that appeared on the modern systems, but she could also detect the acoustic environment's underlying structure, the way sound waves bent and reflected through the water column, creating the complex three-dimensional soundscape that modern systems often simplified into two-dimensional representations. The morning had proceeded according to script, with exercise submarines making predictable approaches and the defensive systems responding with practiced precision. Sarah had contributed to the overall picture, providing additional detail and confirmation of contacts that the other systems had already detected. Her work had been competent, but not extraordinary, exactly what her critics expected from someone using obsolete equipment to duplicate the results of modern technology. It was during the afternoon watch that Sarah began to notice something that the other systems had missed. A subtle pattern in the background noise, a rhythmic variation that suggested the presence of something that wasn't supposed to be there. The signature was extraordinarily faint, appearing only intermittently and buried beneath the acoustic clutter of the exercise activity. Most operators would have dismissed it as noise, but Sarah's trained ear recognized it as something more significant. She had begun the careful process of acoustic analysis, adjusting her system's parameters and correlating the returns with environmental data. The work was painstaking and required the kind of focused attention that modern systems rarely demanded from their operators. She had to account for the way sound waves were affected by water temperature, salinity, and pressure, creating a three-dimensional mental model of the acoustic environment that would allow her to isolate the mysterious signature from the background noise. The process had taken nearly an hour, during which time Sarah had worked in virtual isolation while her colleagues continued their routine monitoring of the exercise submarines. Her concentration had been so intense that she had barely noticed the change in watch personnel or the routine communications traffic that flowed through the operations room. The world had narrowed to the green glow of her display and the subtle acoustic patterns that were slowly resolving into something recognizable. When the realization finally came, it had hit her with the force of a physical blow. The signature she had been tracking wasn't part of the exercise at all. It was a real submarine, operating with such sophisticated stealth technology that it had remained completely invisible to the fleet's modern sonar systems. The acoustic pattern she had detected was the result of a new type of propulsion system, one that created such minimal noise that only the most sensitive and skilled acoustic analysis could detect it. Sarah's hands had trembled slightly as she began the process of confirming her analysis, running through the systematic checks that would verify her findings and provide the detailed information that her superiors would need to respond to the threat. The submarine was operating in a position that would allow it to attack the exercise convoy with devastating effect, its stealth capabilities providing it with the element of surprise that was essential to modern submarine warfare. The implications were staggering. If her analysis was correct, then an unknown submarine had penetrated the defensive perimeter of an entire fleet exercise, reaching an attack position without being detected by any of the modern sonar systems that were supposed to provide early warning of such threats. The failure represented not just a training exercise shortcoming but a fundamental vulnerability in the Navy's defensive capabilities. But Sarah also knew that her findings would be met with skepticism, particularly given the source. She was the officer who worked with obsolete equipment, who had been marginalized by her colleagues and dismissed by her superiors. Her claims about detecting the submarine that had escaped notice by all the modern systems would be seen as either desperation or delusion, the product of someone trying to justify her continued relevance in a world that had moved beyond her capabilities. The weight of that knowledge settled on her shoulders like a physical burden as she prepared to make the report that would either vindicate her years of dedication or mark the end of her naval career. The green glow of her display continued to paint the subtle acoustic signature that only she could see, a technological ghost that held the power to save or destroy everything she had worked to achieve. The decision to report her findings crystallized in Sarah's mind like ice forming on a winter lake. She reached for the internal communications headset, her fingers hovering over the transmit button as she rehearsed the words that would either validate years of professional dedication or destroy what remained of her credibility. The operations room continued its steady rhythm around her, voices calling out routine contact updates and bearing changes while the green phosphorescence of her display painted the acoustic signature that only she could interpret. Lieutenant Commander Morrison stood at the central plotting table, his attention focused on the holographic display that showed the exercise's progress with digital precision. The modern sonar contacts moved across the three-dimensional representation like pieces on a tactical chessboard, each submarine threat clearly identified and tracked by the fleet's sophisticated sensor network. His confidence was evident in his posture, the assured bearing of an officer whose equipment had never failed to deliver the information he needed to make tactical decisions. Sarah activated her communication circuit, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to report. Sonar control, this is Console 7. I have a new contact. Bearing 270, range approximately 12,000 yards. Classification unknown. but acoustic signature suggests advanced diesel-electric propulsion with sophisticated noise reduction capabilities. The words hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon, creating a moment of silence that seemed to stretch beyond its actual duration. Morrison's head turned toward her console, his expression shifting from mild annoyance to outright incredulity as he processed what she had said. The other operators paused in their work, attention drawn by the unusual nature of Sarah's report and the implications it carried for the exercise scenario. Morrison approached her station with the measured pace of someone preparing for an unpleasant confrontation. His uniform was immaculate, pressed to knife-edge perfection, and his insignia caught the overhead lighting as he moved between the modern consoles toward Sarah's corner of the operations room. The contrast between his gleaming equipment and her aged system seemed to emphasize the gulf between their approaches to naval warfare. "Console 7, repeat your last transmission," Morrison said, his voice carrying the formal tone that naval officers used when they wanted to create official distance from a situation. "Are you reporting a contact that hasn't been detected by any other sonar system in the fleet?" Sarah's response was measured and professional, her years of training suppressing the defensive reaction that threatened to color her words. "Affirmative. Sonar control. The contact is extremely faint and intermittent, consistent with advanced stealth technology. The acoustic signature appears only at specific intervals and requires careful analysis to distinguish from background noise." Morrison's expression hardened into the mask of professional skepticism that Sarah had encountered countless times throughout her career. He moved closer to her console, his eyes scanning the green displays that showed the acoustic returns she had been analyzing. To someone unfamiliar with the SQS-26 system, the information would appear as meaningless patterns of light, no more significant than the random fluctuations of electronic noise. "I don't see anything on your display that resembles a submarine." "Contact," Morrison said, his voice loud enough to carry to the other operators who had begun listening to the exchange with obvious interest. "What I see is background noise and possibly some biological activity. Are you certain you're not misinterpreting natural phenomena as an artificial contact?" The question struck Sarah like a calculated insult, challenging not just her immediate assessment but her fundamental competence as a sonar operator. Morrison's tone suggested that he was dealing with someone whose judgment couldn't be trusted, whose enthusiasm for obsolete equipment had led her to see threats where none existed. The implication was clear. Sarah's dedication to the SQS-26 system had blinded her to the limitations of her equipment and her own capabilities. Sarah maintained her composure, her voice remaining level as she responded to Morrison's challenge. "The acoustic signature shows characteristics consistent with a diesel-electric submarine using advanced noise reduction technology. The pattern is too regular to be biological and too complex to be random noise. I recommend immediate investigation of the bearing I've provided." Morrison's laugh was short and dismissive, a sound that carried clearly through the operations room and drew the attention of every person present. "Lieutenant Commander Chun, we have the most advanced sonar suite in the Navy monitoring this exercise area. If there were an unidentified submarine operating in our vicinity, it would have been detected by multiple systems. Your equipment, while historically significant, simply doesn't have the sensitivity or accuracy to detect contacts that escape our modern sensors." The words were delivered with the casual cruelty of someone who viewed his technical superiority as unassailable. Morrison's confidence was rooted in years of successful operations with digital sonar systems, equipment that had never failed to provide him with clear, unambiguous information about underwater contacts. From his perspective, Sarah's claim represented either incompetence or a desperate attempt to justify her continued relevance in a technologically advanced Navy. Chief Rodriguez had been monitoring the exchange from his position near the communication console, his weathered face reflecting the concern of someone who had witnessed similar confrontations between old-school expertise and modern arrogance. His loyalty to institutional knowledge and respect for experience had created a natural alliance with Sarah, but his enlisted status limited his ability to intervene in disputes between commissioned officers. The tension in the operations room had attracted the attention of the watch officer, Lieutenant Commander Patricia Walsh, who approached the sonar section with the cautious demeanor of someone trying to assess a potentially volatile situation. Walsh was a surface warfare officer whose primary expertise lay in navigation and ship handling rather than underwater acoustics, but her position as watch officer made her responsible for evaluating and responding to all contact reports. Walsh examined Sarah's display with the polite attention of someone who lacked the technical background to make an independent assessment. The green phosphorescent patterns meant little to her, but she understood the implications of the dispute that was developing between her two senior sonar operators. Any decision she made would reflect on her own judgment and could have consequences that extended far beyond the current exercise. "Lieutenant Commander Chun," Walsh said, her voice carefully neutral, "can you provide additional evidence to support your contact classification? Something that would help those of us who aren't familiar with your equipment understand what you're seeing?" Sarah recognized the diplomatic nature of Walsh's request, an attempt to resolve the situation without directly challenging either officer's expertise. The question provided Sarah with an opportunity to explain her analysis in detail, but it also placed the burden of proof squarely on her shoulders. Without corroborating evidence from other sensors, her claims would be viewed as the unsupported opinions of someone using questionable equipment. Sarah began a careful explanation of her acoustic analysis, describing the subtle patterns she had detected and the technical characteristics that suggested an advanced submarine rather than natural phenomena. Her words were precise and technical, drawing on years of specialized training and her unique understanding of the SQS-26 system's capabilities. She spoke of frequency analysis and acoustic propagation, of the way sound waves interacted with the complex underwater environment to create the signature she had detected. Morrison listened with barely concealed impatience, his body language making clear his view that Sarah's explanation was an elaborate rationalization for a fundamental error in judgment. When she finished, he responded with the clinical precision of someone delivering a professional verdict that would end the discussion definitively. "Lieutenant Commander Chun's analysis is based on equipment that lacks the sophistication to make the distinctions she's claiming," Morrison said, his words directed toward Walsh but clearly intended for the entire operations room to hear. The SQS-26 system was adequate for its time, but modern submarines use stealth technology that requires equally modern detection systems to counter. If there were a submarine in the area she's indicated, our passive sonar arrays would have detected it hours ago. The dismissal was complete and devastating, delivered with the authority of someone whose expertise was backed by the Navy's latest technology. Morrison's confidence was infectious, spreading through the operations room and creating a consensus that Sarah's claims were the result of outdated equipment and wishful thinking. The other operators returned to their duties with the satisfied air of people who had witnessed the resolution of an embarrassing situation. Sarah felt the familiar weight of professional isolation settling over her like a familiar but unwelcome garment. The pattern was depressingly predictable, her detection of something significant, followed by skepticism from colleagues who trusted their modern systems more than her specialized knowledge, and finally the dismissal of her findings as the products of inferior equipment or operator error. But this time felt different, more consequential than the routine exercises where her contributions had been marginalized. The acoustic signature she had detected possessed characteristics that suggested not just an unknown submarine, but one equipped with technology that represented a significant advancement in stealth capabilities. If her analysis was correct, then the fleet was facing a threat that its primary defensive systems couldn't detect, a vulnerability that could have catastrophic consequences in actual combat. The afternoon watch continued with the efficient routine of a well-trained crew performing familiar duties. The exercise submarines made their scripted approaches, the defensive systems responded with practiced precision, and the tactical picture evolved according to the predetermined scenario. Sarah remained at her console, continuing to monitor the mysterious contact while her colleagues focused on the official exercise activities. The acoustic signature persisted, appearing and disappearing at intervals that suggested a submarine maintaining a careful surveillance pattern while avoiding the detection ranges of the fleet's modern sonar systems. Sarah's analysis indicated that the unknown vessel was gradually closing the distance to the exercise convoy, moving with the patient precision of a predator approaching its prey. Her attempts to share this information were met with increasingly obvious indifference. Morrison had made his position clear, and the other operators had taken their cue from his authoritative dismissal of her claims. When Sarah tried to provide updates on the contact's movement, her reports were acknowledged with the minimal courtesy required by naval protocol, but were clearly not being incorporated into the tactical picture. The isolation was compounded by the arrival of additional personnel who had come to observe the exercise's progress. Senior officers from the fleet staff moved through the operations room, examining the displays and discussing the tactical situation with evident satisfaction. Their conversations focused on the effectiveness of the modern sonar systems and the precision with which the defensive network was tracking and engaging the exercise threats. Admiral Wade himself appeared during the evening watch, his presence transforming the operations room's atmosphere from professional efficiency to nervous precision. The Admiral was known for his hands-on leadership style and his tendency to ask pointed questions that revealed whether his subordinates truly understood their equipment and responsibilities. His inspection of the sonar section was thorough and demanding, but his attention focused exclusively on the modern systems and their operators. When Wade paused at Sarah's console, his examination was perfunctory and dismissive. He glanced at the green displays with the polite but distant interest of someone viewing a museum exhibit, asking a few basic questions about the system specifications. Before moving on to more contemporary equipment, the message was clear. Sarah's work was a historical curiosity, rather than a meaningful contribution to the fleet's defensive capabilities. The Admiral's visit culminated in an impromptu briefing where he praised the effectiveness of the fleet's modern sonar network and the skill of the operators who had successfully tracked and engaged all exercise threats. His words were carefully chosen to emphasize the Navy's technological superiority and the obsolescence of older systems that lacked the sensitivity and precision of contemporary equipment. This exercise demonstrates conclusively that our investment in advanced sonar technology has provided us with underwater surveillance capabilities that are second to none, Wade declared, his voice carrying the authority of someone whose opinions shape naval policy. We can detect, track, and engage submarine threats with a precision that would have been impossible just a decade ago. The era of uncertainty and guesswork in underwater warfare is behind us. Sarah listened to the Admiral's words with growing unease, understanding that they represented more than just satisfaction with the exercise's progress. Wade was making a statement about the Navy's future direction, one that explicitly excluded the kind of specialized knowledge and unconventional approaches that she represented. His praise for modern technology was simultaneously a condemnation of older methods and the officers who continued to advocate for them. The briefing concluded with Ward's announcement that the exercise would continue through the night, providing additional opportunities to test the fleet's defensive capabilities against realistic submarine threats. His confidence was absolute. Based on the clear tactical picture provided by the modern sonar systems and the successful engagement of all identified contacts. From his perspective, the exercise was proceeding exactly as planned, with no surprises or complications to disturb the orderly progression of events. But Sarah knew something that the Admiral and his staff didn't. The most dangerous threat in the exercise area remained completely invisible to their sophisticated sensors. The unknown submarine continued its patient approach, moving closer to the convoy while the fleet's defensive systems focused on the officially designated exercise targets. The situation was developing into exactly the kind of tactical surprise that could determine the outcome of actual combat operations. As the evening progressed, Sarah's frustration mounted with each ignored report and dismissed observation. Her colleagues had effectively isolated her from the operational decision-making process, treating her console as a historical display rather than a functional sensor system. The tactical picture that guided the fleet's movements and responses was based on incomplete information, missing the most significant threat in the operating area. The night watch brought a change in personnel but no change in attitudes. The incoming operators had been briefed on the exercise's progress and the location of all identified threats, information that didn't include Sarah's mysterious contact. Her attempts to brief the new watch on her findings were met with polite but skeptical attention, the kind of professional courtesy extended to someone whose contributions were considered irrelevant to serious military operations. Lieutenant Jennifer Nakamura, who assumed the senior sonar operator position for the night watch, exemplified the new generation of naval officers who had grown up with digital technology and viewed analog systems as relics of a less sophisticated era. Her training had focused exclusively on computer-assisted analysis and automated threat recognition, skills that were perfectly suited to the Navy's modern equipment, but which left her unprepared to evaluate Sarah's unconventional findings. Nakamura's review of the tactical situation was efficient and thorough, but it was based entirely on the information provided by the digital sonar systems. When Sarah attempted to add her observations about the unknown contact, Nakamura's response was politely dismissive, the reaction of someone who had been warned about the older officer's tendency to see patterns in random noise. Lieutenant Commander Chun, I understand you've been tracking what you believe to be an unidentified contact, Nakamura said, her voice carrying the carefully modulated tone of someone trying to avoid offense while making her position clear. However, our passive sonar arrays show no indication of submarine activity in the bearing you've indicated. It's possible that your equipment is picking up some kind of acoustic anomaly that our systems are correctly filtering out as irrelevant. The explanation was delivered with the confidence of someone whose faith in technology was absolute. From Nakamura's perspective, the failure of the modern systems to detect Sarah's contact was proof that no such contact existed, rather than evidence that the older equipment might be capable of detecting something that escaped digital analysis. Her training had taught her to trust the computer more than human intuition, to rely on algorithmic analysis rather than the subtle interpretations that had once been the foundation of sonar operations. Sarah's response was measured but firm, drawing on her years of experience and specialized knowledge to challenge the assumptions that underlay Nakamura's dismissal. Lieutenant Nakamura, the contact I'm tracking exhibits characteristics that suggest advanced stealth technology specifically designed to evade modern detection systems. The acoustic signature is extremely subtle, but it's consistent with intelligence reports about new submarine technologies being developed by potential adversaries. The reference to intelligence reports was calculated to add weight to Sarah's claims, but it also revealed the fundamental problem she faced. Her knowledge was based on classified information that she couldn't discuss in detail, specialized understanding that couldn't be easily shared with officers who lacked her background in acoustic analysis. The very expertise that made her valuable also isolated her from colleagues who couldn't appreciate the significance of what she was reporting. Nakamura's skepticism remained unchanged, reinforced by her confidence in the digital systems that had never failed to provide her with clear, unambiguous information about underwater contacts. Her response reflected the institutional bias toward technological solutions that had marginalized officers like Sarah, who relied on human expertise and unconventional methods. If there were an advanced submarine operating in this area, our systems would detect it, Nakamura stated with finality. The passive arrays are specifically designed to identify the acoustic signatures of all known submarine classes, including those with advanced noise reduction capabilities. Your equipment, while historically significant, simply doesn't have the sensitivity to detect contacts that our modern sensors would miss. The circular logic was maddening in its completeness. Because the modern systems hadn't detected the submarine, no submarine existed, and therefore Sarah's claims were invalid. The possibility that the older equipment might be capable of detecting something that escaped digital analysis was dismissed as inherently impossible, a violation of the technological progress that defined modern naval warfare. Sarah found herself trapped in a professional paradox where her expertise was simultaneously valued and dismissed, where her unique capabilities were recognized in theory but ignored in practice. The Navy had invested years of training and resources in developing her specialized knowledge, but when that knowledge produced results that challenged conventional wisdom, it was discarded as unreliable. The night hours passed with agonizing slowness as Sarah continued to track the unknown submarine's gradual approach toward the exercise convoy. Her analysis indicated that the vessel was maintaining a careful surveillance pattern, gathering intelligence about the fleet's defensive capabilities while positioning itself for a potential attack. The submarine's movements were patient and methodical, suggesting a crew with extensive training and confidence in their stealth technology. Each update Sarah provided was noted with decreasing interest, her reports becoming part of the background noise that the watch team had learned to ignore. The tactical picture that guided the fleet's movements remained based exclusively on the contacts detected by the modern sonar systems, creating a dangerous blind spot that grew more significant with each passing hour. The approaching dawn brought fresh personnel and renewed activity as the exercise entered its final phase. The scenario called for a coordinated submarine attack on the convoy, with multiple exercise submarines attempting to penetrate the defensive perimeter simultaneously. The complexity of the situation would test the fleet's ability to manage multiple threats while maintaining protective coverage for the simulated merchant vessels. Admiral Wade returned to the operations room as the final phase began, his presence adding gravity to what was intended to be the exercise's climactic demonstration of the fleet's defensive capabilities. His staff clustered around the central displays, monitoring the tactical situation with the intense focus of people whose professional reputations depended on the successful completion of the scenario. The modern sonar systems tracked the approaching exercise submarines with impressive precision, displaying their movements on holographic charts that showed every aspect of the developing tactical situation. The defensive responses were coordinated and effective, with intercepting vessels moving to engage each threat before it could reach weapon launch position. From every visible indicator, the fleet's defensive network was performing exactly as designed. But Sarah knew that the most dangerous threat remained invisible to the systems that everyone else trusted completely. The unknown submarine had reached a position where it could attack the convoy with devastating effect, its advanced stealth technology providing complete concealment from the fleet's primary defensive sensors. The situation represented exactly the kind of technological surprise that could determine the outcome of actual combat operations. The moment of decision arrived with the suddenness of a lightning strike. Sarah realized that her continued attempts to work through normal channels were futile, that the institutional bias against her methods and equipment had created an impenetrable barrier to communicating vital information. The submarine she had detected represented a clear and present danger to the exercise convoy, but her warnings were being dismissed as the delusions of someone using obsolete equipment. Sarah's hands moved across her console with the precision of years of training, fine-tuning her analysis and confirming the data that supported her assessment. The acoustic signature was undeniable, showing characteristics that could only be produced by an advanced submarine using sophisticated noise reduction technology. The contact's position and movement pattern indicated an immediate threat to the convoy, one that required urgent defensive action. The decision crystallized in her mind with the clarity of absolute certainty. Professional protocols and institutional hierarchies had failed to address the situation, leaving her with only one option that might prevent a catastrophic tactical surprise. Sarah reached for the emergency communication circuit, the direct line that bypassed normal channels and connected her immediately to the fleet commander's staff. Her finger hovered over the activation switch as she considered the consequences of what she was about to do. Using the emergency circuit would create an official incident that would be investigated at the highest levels of naval command. If her analysis proved incorrect, her career would be effectively ended, her credibility destroyed by the presumption of challenging the fleet's most senior officers with unsubstantiated claims. But if her analysis was correct, if the unknown submarine represented the kind of advanced threat that her intelligence briefings had warned about, then the fleet was facing a moment of truth that would define its readiness for modern naval warfare. The exercise had been designed to test the Navy's defensive capabilities against realistic threats, but no one had anticipated encountering a real submarine with technology that exceeded the parameters of the planned scenario. Sarah activated the emergency circuit, her voice steady and professional as she delivered the most important report of her naval career. The words would either validate years of dedication to unconventional methods or mark the end of her service as a commissioned officer. But the choice had been made with the absolute conviction that came from true expertise confronting institutional blindness. Flash priority communication. This is Sonar Console 7 aboard USS Constellation. Sarah's voice cut through the tactical communications network with the urgent clarity that emergency protocols demanded. I have immediate detection of unidentified submarine contact bearing 270, range 8,000 yards and closing on convoy position. Contact exhibits advanced stealth characteristics not detected by primary sonar systems. Recommend immediate defensive action. The emergency circuit transmitted her words simultaneously to the fleet commander's bridge, the tactical action center, and every major command post in the exercise force. The gravity of using the flash priority channel could not be understated. It was reserved for genuine threats that required immediate command attention, bypassing all normal communication hierarchies to deliver critical information directly to decision-makers. Admiral Wade's reaction was immediate and volcanic. His voice exploded across the communication network with the fury of a senior officer whose authority had been challenged by what he perceived as reckless insubordination. Who authorized the use of emergency communications for this exercise scenario? I want that operator identified immediately and brought to the bridge under escort. The Admiral's rage reverberated through every speaker in the operations room, transforming the previously efficient atmosphere into one of electric tension. Sarah felt the weight of every gaze in the compartment settling on her like physical pressure, the shocked stares of colleagues who couldn't believe that anyone would dare to challenge the fleet commander's tactical assessment with such dramatic directness. Lieutenant Commander Morrison's face had gone pale with a mixture of embarrassment and fury, his professional reputation suddenly threatened by association with what appeared to be a massive breach of military protocol. He moved toward Sarah's console with the rigid stride of someone preparing to physically remove her from her equipment, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Lieutenant Commander Chun, you are relieved of duty immediately, Morrison declared, his words carrying across the operations room like an official pronouncement. Report to the bridge and prepare to explain your actions to Admiral Wade personally. Your console will be secured pending investigation of this incident." But Sarah remained seated at her station, her hands steady on the controls, despite the storm of official disapproval swirling around her. Her years of specialized training had taught her to trust her acoustic analysis over political considerations, and the submarine signature on her display continued to paint the story of an approaching threat that demanded immediate attention, regardless of the personal consequences. I respectfully declined to abandon my post while tracking an active submarine contact that poses an immediate threat to this fleet. Sarah responded, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone whose convictions were absolute. "The contact is now at 7,000 yards and maintaining course toward the convoy. I recommend immediate deployment of anti-submarine assets to investigate and engage." The standoff that developed in the operations room reflected the larger conflict between institutional authority and technical expertise that had characterized Sarah's entire career. Morrison stood frozen between his duty to enforce the Admiral's orders and his growing uncertainty about whether Sarah's claims might actually be valid. The other operators watched with fascinated horror as their colleague committed what appeared to be career suicide in defense of readings from obsolete equipment. Chief Rodriguez had moved closer to Sarah's console, his weathered face reflecting the internal struggle of someone torn between loyalty to institutional hierarchy and respect for technical competence. His decades of experience had taught him to recognize the difference between genuine expertise and misguided enthusiasm. And something in Sarah's demeanor suggested that her confidence was based on more than wishful thinking. The tactical communications network crackled with urgent transmissions as the fleet commander's staff attempted to assess the situation and determine appropriate responses. Admiral Wade's initial fury was giving way to the careful calculation of a senior officer who understood that hasty decisions in complex situations could have consequences that extended far beyond the immediate crisis. Captain Elizabeth Hawkins, the fleet's senior intelligence officer, had been monitoring the communications from the Tactical Action Center when Sarah's emergency transmission arrived. Unlike the operations personnel, who were focused on exercise protocols and equipment capabilities, Hawkins possessed classified knowledge about emerging submarine technologies that gave her a different perspective on Sarah's claims. Hawkins knew that recent intelligence reports had warned about advanced diesel-electric submarines, equipped with new forms of noise reduction technology that could potentially evade conventional sonar detection. The reports had been classified at the highest levels because they suggested that potential adversaries had achieved breakthrough capabilities that could compromise NATO's underwater surveillance networks. More significantly, Hawkins was familiar with Sarah's background from the classified files that documented her research work at the Naval Research Laboratory. The intelligence officer understood that Sarah's expertise with older sonar systems wasn't merely historical curiosity, but represented a specialized knowledge base that might be uniquely valuable in detecting submarines designed to evade modern sensors. The intersection of Sarah's technical capabilities and the intelligence community's concerns about advanced submarine threats created a possibility that Hawkins couldn't ignore, regardless of the apparent breach of military protocol. If Sarah had actually detected a submarine with advanced stealth capabilities, then the implications extended far beyond the current exercise to fundamental questions about the Navy's defensive readiness. Hawkins activated her direct communication, linked to Admiral Wade's command post, her voice carrying the authority of someone whose intelligence assessments had guided fleet operations for over a decade. "Admiral, this is Captain Hawkins from Intelligence. I recommend we take Lieutenant Commander Chen's report seriously and investigate her contact immediately. Recent classified intelligence suggests the possibility of advanced submarine technologies that could evade our standard detection systems." The intervention of the fleet intelligence officer transformed the situation from a simple disciplinary matter into a complex operational decision that required careful evaluation. Wade found himself confronting the possibility that his dismissal of Sarah's claims might have been premature, that his confidence in modern technology might have blinded him to legitimate tactical intelligence. The Admiral's response reflected the internal struggle of a senior officer whose institutional biases were being challenged by operational realities. "Captain Hawkins, are you suggesting that obsolete sonar equipment operated by a single officer might have detected a submarine that escaped notice by our entire sensor network?" Hawkins' reply was measured but firm, drawing on her years of experience in evaluating intelligence from unconventional sources. "Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Chen possesses specialized expertise in acoustic analysis that may be uniquely suited to detecting certain types of advanced submarine signatures. I recommend deploying SW assets to investigate her reported contact position immediately." The recommendation carried weight that extended beyond the immediate tactical situation. Captain Hawkins' intelligence assessments had guided successful fleet operations throughout her career, and her credibility with senior command personnel gave her opinions influence that transcended normal hierarchical considerations. Her support for Sarah's claims couldn't be dismissed as easily as the reports from a marginalized sonar operator. Admiral Wade faced a decision that would define not only the exercise's outcome, but his own professional legacy. Accepting Sarah's claims would require acknowledging that his confidence in modern technology had been misplaced, that a single officer using obsolete equipment had detected a threat that escaped the fleet's most sophisticated sensors. Rejecting her claims might result in tactical surprise if her analysis proved correct. The tension in the Tactical Action Center was palpable as Wade weighed his options, surrounded by staff officers who waited for guidance that would determine their responses to the developing situation. The exercise scenario had been designed to test the fleet's capabilities against known threats, but the possibility of encountering an unknown submarine with advanced capabilities had transformed the planned training evolution into something potentially more significant. Wade's decision came with the deliberate authority of someone whose command experience had taught him to balance institutional loyalty with operational necessities. Deploy Romeo 7 and Golf 3 to investigate the reported contact position immediately. Maintain exercise schedule, but treat the investigation as a real-world ASW operation until the contact is positively identified or determined to be spurious. The order represented a careful compromise that acknowledged the possibility of a genuine threat, while avoiding complete endorsement of Sarah's claims. 2 anti-submarine warfare helicopters would investigate her reported contact position using their advanced sensors and sonobuoys, providing independent verification of whether an unknown submarine was actually operating in the area. The deployment order transmitted through the tactical network with the urgency of actual combat operations, vectoring the helicopter crews toward the coordinates that Sarah had provided based on her acoustic analysis. The aircrews understood that their mission had implications beyond routine exercise activities, that they were investigating a potential threat that might represent a fundamental challenge to the fleet's defensive capabilities. Romeo 7 reached the designated search area within 12 minutes of receiving the deployment order, its crew immediately beginning the systematic sonobuoy deployment pattern that would create an acoustic net capable of detecting any submarine operating in the vicinity. The helicopter's modern sensors represented the latest advancement in anti-submarine warfare technology, equipped with processing capabilities that far exceeded anything available to surface vessels. Lieutenant Commander David Park, Romeo 7's tactical coordinator, supervised the sonobuoy deployment with the methodical precision of someone whose training had prepared him for exactly this type of investigation. His equipment was designed to detect even the most sophisticated submarine signatures through advanced signal processing and pattern recognition algorithms that analyzed acoustic data in real time. The initial sonobuoy returns showed no immediate indication of submarine activity, confirming the skepticism that most personnel felt about Sarah's claims. Park's voice carried a note of professional vindication as he reported the negative results to the Fleet Tactical Center, suggesting that the investigation was proceeding exactly as expected. Tactical Control, Romeo 7 reports negative submarine contact in designated search area. Park transmitted, his confidence evident in the casual tone that suggested routine completion of a predictable mission. Initial sonobuoy deployment shows no acoustic signatures consistent with submarine activity, continuing expanded search pattern per standard protocols. But Sarah's analysis had indicated that the unknown submarine possessed stealth capabilities specifically designed to evade conventional detection methods. The fact that standard sonobuoy patterns failed to immediately locate the contact didn't invalidate her assessment. Instead, it confirmed her evaluation of the target's advanced noise reduction technology. Sarah remained at her console despite the official orders relieving her from duty, continuing to track the subtle acoustic signature that painted the submarine's movement through the water column. Her analysis indicated that the contact was aware of the helicopter investigation and had adjusted its course to avoid the sonobuoy deployment pattern, demonstrating tactical sophistication that exceeded normal exercise parameters. The contact has altered course to bearing 295 and reduced speed, Sarah announced to the operations room, her voice cutting through the tense atmosphere with the authority of someone whose technical expertise transcended institutional politics. Movement pattern suggests awareness of a SW investigation and deliberate evasion tactics. Morrison's response was immediate and angry, his professional frustration boiling over into open confrontation with someone he viewed as insubordinate and delusional. Lieutenant Commander Chun, you have been relieved of duty and ordered to report to the bridge. Your continued presence at that console constitutes direct disobedience of lawful orders. But Chief Rodriguez had been quietly observing Sarah's display during the developing crisis, his decades of sonar experience allowing him to recognize patterns that escaped less experienced observers. The acoustic signature that Sarah was tracking possessed characteristics that Rodriguez found genuinely compelling, subtle variations that suggested artificial rather than natural phenomena. Sir, I recommend we continue monitoring Console 7's contact, Rodriguez interjected, his voice carrying the measured authority of a senior enlisted person whose technical opinions were respected throughout the fleet. The acoustic pattern shows characteristics that warrant investigation regardless of equipment limitations. Rodriguez's intervention represented more than technical support for Sarah's analysis. It reflected the institutional knowledge of someone who had operated multiple generations of sonar equipment and understood the capabilities that each system brought to underwater surveillance. His endorsement of Sarah's findings carried weight that transcended the technological biases that had marginalized her work. The chief's words created a moment of hesitation in Morrison's aggressive response, introducing doubt about the wisdom of completely dismissing Sarah's claims without thorough investigation. Rodriguez's reputation for technical competence was unassailable, and his support for Sarah's analysis couldn't be easily dismissed as the product of obsolete thinking or misguided loyalty. Captain Hawkins had been monitoring the tactical communications from the intelligence center, tracking the helicopter investigation's progress while maintaining awareness of Sarah's continued contact reports. The intelligence officer's understanding of advanced submarine technologies gave her a unique perspective on the developing situation and its implications for fleet security. Hawkins contacted Romeo 7 directly, providing the aircrew with classified intelligence about potential submarine signatures that might require modified detection procedures. Her briefing included information about noise reduction technologies that could defeat standard sonobuoy patterns and the Acoustic characteristics that might indicate their presence. Romeo 7, intelligence advises that target may employ advanced noise reduction requiring non-standard detection procedures. Hawkins transmitted, her words carrying the authority of classified information. Recommend modified search pattern focusing on indirect acoustic indicators rather than direct signature detection. The intelligence briefing transformed Romeo 7's mission from routine contact investigation to specialized hunt for a potentially sophisticated adversary. Lieutenant Commander Park acknowledged the new parameters with growing seriousness, understanding that his failure to locate the submarine might indicate its advanced capabilities rather than its non-existence. Park modified his search pattern. Based on the intelligence guidance, deploying sonobuoys in configurations designed to detect the indirect acoustic effects that advanced submarines might create even while suppressing their direct signatures. The new approach required more time and sophisticated analysis, but it offered better prospects for detecting targets with sophisticated stealth technology. The modified search pattern produced results within 20 minutes of implementation. Park's voice carried a note of surprised discovery as he reported the detection to Fleet Tactical Control, his professional confidence shaken by the realization that his initial assessment had been incorrect. Tactical Control, Romeo 7 has passive acoustic contact bearing 293. Range 6,000 yards from convoy position. Park transmitted, his voice tight with the implications of what he was reporting. Contact shows characteristics consistent with diesel-electric submarine using advanced noise reduction technology. Recommend immediate classification as potentially hostile. The confirmation of Sarah's acoustic analysis reverberated through the fleet's command structure like a seismic shock, fundamentally altering the tactical situation and the professional dynamics that had characterized the exercise. Her detection of an advanced submarine using obsolete equipment had been vindicated by independent verification from the Navy's most sophisticated ASW assets. Admiral Wade's response to the confirmation reflected the internal struggle of a senior officer whose fundamental assumptions about technology and capability had been challenged by operational reality. His voice carried a note of grudging acknowledgement mixed with professional concern about the implications of what had been discovered. All units, this is Fleet Actual. We have confirmed detection of unidentified submarine contact in exercise area. Implement immediate defensive measures and treat contact as potentially hostile until positively identified. Exercise scenario is suspended pending resolution of this situation. The transformation from training exercise to real world military operation occurred with the rapid efficiency that characterized professional naval forces responding to genuine threats. The fleet's defensive posture shifted from scripted responses to exercise submarines to coordinated protection against an unknown adversary whose capabilities exceeded planned scenario parameters. Sarah felt a complex mixture of vindication and apprehension as her acoustic analysis was validated by the fleet's response. Her years of dedication to unconventional methods had been justified, but the discovery of an advanced submarine in the exercise area raised questions about intelligence, failures and defensive vulnerabilities that extended far beyond her personal professional struggles. The tactical situation continued to develop as additional ASW assets converged on the submarine's position, creating a coordinated response that demonstrated the fleet's capability to adapt rapidly to unexpected threats. The unknown submarine found itself increasingly constrained by the defensive measures that its initial stealth advantage had allowed it to evade. Gulf 3, the second helicopter deployed to investigate Sarah's contact, arrived in the search area equipped with active sonar capabilities that could provide definitive identification of the submarine's characteristics. The aircrew understood that their mission had evolved from routine investigation to critical intelligence gathering that might determine the Navy's response to emerging technological threats. The active sonar contact painted a detailed picture of the submarine that confirmed Sarah's assessment of its advanced design characteristics. The vessel possessed hull configurations and propulsion systems that differed significantly from known submarine classes, suggesting either a new design or substantial modifications to existing platforms. Lieutenant Commander Susan Martinez, Gulf III's mission commander, transmitted her analysis with the professional precision of someone whose assessment would influence high-level military decisions. Fleet Tactical, Gulf III, confirms submarine contact with hull characteristics not consistent with known database entries. Recommend immediate intelligence evaluation and potential classification as advanced threat platform. The identification of an unknown submarine design operating in U.S. training areas represented a significant intelligence event that would require investigation at the highest levels of naval command. The vessel's presence suggested either a major intelligence failure or a deliberate challenge to American naval supremacy that demanded careful diplomatic and military response. Sarah watched the developing tactical picture from her console as the fleet's anti-submarine forces gradually surrounded the unknown submarine, creating a defensive net that prevented its escape while gathering intelligence about its capabilities. Her role in detecting the initial contact had been acknowledged through operational necessity, but the personal vindication felt secondary to the larger implications of what had been discovered. Admiral Wade's voice returned to the tactical network. As the situation stabilized, his tone reflecting the measured authority of someone whose initial skepticism had been replaced by professional respect for capabilities he had previously dismissed. Lieutenant Commander Chun, report to Tactical Control immediately for detailed briefing on your contact analysis. Your expertise will be required for ongoing evaluation of this situation. The summons represented more than acknowledgement of Sarah's technical competence. It marked a fundamental shift in institutional attitudes toward unconventional approaches and specialized knowledge. Her detection of the advanced submarine had demonstrated that human expertise, combined with older technology, could provide capabilities that purely modern approaches might miss. Morrison's apology came privately, delivered with the genuine contrition of someone whose professional arrogance had been humbled by operational reality. His words reflected not just personal embarrassment, but recognition that his dismissal of Sarah's capabilities had nearly resulted in tactical disaster. Lieutenant Commander Chun, I owe you a professional apology, Morrison said, his voice stripped of its earlier condescension. Your analysis was correct, and my failure to take it seriously could have had serious consequences for fleet security. I would like to request briefing on your acoustic analysis techniques for potential integration with our modern systems. The request represented a complete reversal of the professional dynamics that had characterized Sarah's tenure aboard the Constellation. Morrison's acknowledgement of her expertise opened possibilities for collaboration that had been impossible. When her methods were viewed as obsolete curiosities rather than valuable capabilities, Chief Rodriguez approached Sarah's console with the satisfied expression of someone whose faith in institutional knowledge had been validated. His support during the crisis had reflected not just personal loyalty but professional understanding. That expertise took many forms and shouldn't be dismissed based on technological prejudices. Outstanding work, Lieutenant Commander, Rodriguez said, his voice carrying the respect of someone whose own career had been built on recognizing and developing technical talent. Your persistence in tracking that contact probably saved this exercise from becoming a real tactical disaster. The submarine itself had been forced to surface under the pressure of the coordinated ASW response, revealing a design that confirmed intelligence community concerns about advancing submarine technology. The vessel's crew was taken into custody for questioning while diplomatic channels worked to address the implications of its presence in U.S. training areas. Captain Hawkins' debriefing of Sarah extended through the night as the intelligence officer worked to understand exactly how The SQS-26 system had detected a submarine that escaped notice by more advanced sensors. The technical details of Sarah's analysis would inform future development of detection systems and training programs designed to counter emerging submarine threats. The conversation revealed the complex relationship between technological advancement and operational capability that had characterized naval warfare throughout history. While modern systems offered tremendous capabilities in most situations, they also created dependencies and blind spots that could be exploited by adversaries who understood their limitations. Hawkins' analysis of the incident would result in classified reports that reached the highest levels of naval command and influenced decisions about future submarine detection capabilities. Sarah's demonstration that human expertise could complement technological systems would reshape training programs and equipment development priorities for years to come. Admiral Wade's final assessment of the exercise acknowledged both its success as a training evolution and its significance as a real-world intelligence event. His words reflected the professional growth that came from confronting assumptions and adapting to unexpected realities. This exercise has demonstrated that effective naval operations require not just advanced technology, but also the human expertise to interpret information that machines might miss. Wade declared during his closing briefing, "Lieutenant Commander, Chun's detection of an advanced submarine threat has reminded us that progress sometimes means preserving capabilities rather than simply replacing them." The Admiral's acknowledgement represented institutional recognition that Sarah's unconventional approach had value that extended beyond historical curiosity. Her vindication opened possibilities for expanded use of older systems and the specialized knowledge required to operate them effectively. Sarah's transfer orders arrived within a month, assigning her to a new position at the Naval Research Laboratory, where her expertise would be applied to developing hybrid detection systems that combined modern technology with proven older capabilities. The assignment represented not just professional advancement, but institutional commitment to the principles her work had demonstrated. The USS Constellation's sonar room felt different during Sarah's final watch, transformed from a place of professional isolation into one where her contributions were valued and her methods were studied by colleagues eager to learn from her example. The SQS-2 system remained in its corner, no longer a relic but a testament to the enduring value of human expertise in an increasingly automated world. Lieutenant Nakamura approached Sarah's console during the transition, her earlier skepticism replaced by genuine interest in learning techniques that might enhance her own capabilities. The conversation that followed represented the kind of knowledge transfer that Sarah had hoped to achieve throughout her career. "Could you teach me to hear what you hear in the acoustic returns?" Nakamura asked, her voice carrying the humility of someone whose assumptions had been challenged by experience. "I want to understand how human analysis can complement our digital systems." Sarah's response reflected both professional generosity and recognition that her legacy would be measured not just by her individual achievements, but by her ability to pass her knowledge to others. "The machines can process information faster than we can, but they can't understand context the way humans do. Learning to combine both approaches might give us capabilities that neither could achieve alone." The training program that Sarah developed during her remaining weeks aboard the Constellation would become a model for similar efforts throughout the fleet, creating a new generation of sonar operators who understood both technological capabilities and human interpretive skills. Her influence would extend far beyond her personal career to shape the Navy's approach to underwater surveillance. The unknown submarine that Sarah had detected became the subject of intensive intelligence analysis that revealed the extent of technological advancement by potential adversaries. Her successful detection had provided early warning about capabilities that might otherwise have remained secret until employed in actual combat situations. The classified reports generated by the incident influenced naval policy at the highest levels, leading to modifications in training programs, equipment procurement decisions, and operational procedures designed to counter emerging threats. Sarah's contribution to national security extended far beyond the immediate tactical victory to strategic implications that would affect naval warfare for years to come. Her final morning aboard the Constellation brought reflection on the journey that had led from professional marginalization to institutional recognition. The path had been difficult and often lonely, but it had ultimately validated the importance of preserving diverse approaches to complex problems. The green glow of the SQS-26 display continued to paint acoustic pictures of the underwater world as Sarah prepared to transfer her responsibilities to the next operator. The equipment that had been dismissed as obsolete had proven its continued value, and more importantly, it had demonstrated that human expertise remained essential even in an age of technological sophistication. Chief Rodriguez presented Sarah with a small plaque during the change of watch ceremony, its inscription reading simply, "When experience meets expertise, excellence follows." The gift represented not just personal appreciation, but recognition from the enlisted community, whose respect was often more meaningful than official commendations. Sarah's departure from the ship marked the end of one chapter in her career and the beginning of another that would be defined by the institutional changes her work had inspired. The Navy that had once viewed her methods as outdated curiosities now recognized them as essential capabilities that complemented rather than competed with modern technology. The legacy of the exercise would extend beyond the immediate participants to influence naval doctrine and training for years to come. Sarah's detection of an advanced submarine threat had reminded the service that effective defense required not just the latest equipment, but also the human wisdom to use all available tools in pursuit of mission success. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.